I've been growing my vegetables in raised beds for over 30 years and I love it. It just makes life so much easier, they look good and you get far better crops. The reason they grow better is because you've got a nice depth of good soil that's not compacted. So you can plant the vegetables much closer together and growing them is so simple. I always think woven raised beds look really good. Now, if you use woven hazel or woven willow, obviously it's not going to last for that long. We did ours here and they lasted about 10 years. And when you make them, you have the uprights and then you weave the hazel or the willow between them and then you line the back with black polythene, not on the bottom because you want it to drain, but just on the inside, to stop the soil coming through any bits in the weaving, and also because you want the willow to last longer. So they're a lovely one to make, but if you like woven, but you want it to last longer, woven oak or sweet chestnut, both of which we've got here, are really good because both of them are durable timbers. So woven oak is like 2-3 millimeter oak, and we just weave it as tight as you can in slats usually about 10-15 mil thick. Other types we've done is just timber planks and then we put trellis over the top to make it look smarter and finials on the corner. Also we've done timber ones with metal strapping around them. If you put a coping on the top, it's lovely to make it into a seat as well. And obviously there's a payoff between if you have a wider seat, you're going to have less width of raised bed, but it's more comfortable to sit on. So sometimes I go to as narrow as 75 to perch on, and sometimes we might go 300 wide. So you've got a really nice bench really on the top. And I think when you're choosing the height, it's important to choose one that you can just perch on the edge comfortably. And whereas I used to start with just having 100 mil high raised beds when I was younger, 30 odd years ago, and that was fine, now I find 450, 500 is really good. And of course when I'm making them for disabled people or people in wheelchairs, then we often make them 600 or 900 high, depending on the wheelchair heights, because they do vary a lot. I love experimenting with all different types of raised beds, and I thought this 2 millimeter metal sheet, which I've got cut out by my metal fabricator, and he's carefully welded 2 angles on the end, given me a pack of screws. So this is a really simple way to make a metal raised bed. It costs just under £150. This looks a bit, well, doesn't look very prepossessing at the moment, but you could have a rusted finish if you just let this rust up. And then because I don't like these hard edges, I like to perch on the edge, I would put a nice thick coping, a couple of posts in the corners, and then put the coping on the top, and then you could sit on the wooden coping. If you didn't want the rusted finish, you could go really smart. You could galvanise it, hop dip galvanise it, and then you paint on a tea wash. And this is extraordinary. You do it on a lot of metal work, and it just makes it look like lead, a lovely sort of opaque lead colour. And I'll show you some obelisks where we've actually galvanised them, tea washed them, and then we put real lead round bosses on them, and you can hardly tell the difference between the two. Normally, I'm really concerned about aesthetics. In my polytunnel, the ones I've just made, my criteria are quite different. I want them to be as inexpensive and as easy to make as possible. I've ordered online this black corrugated iron sheeting. Sometimes it's known as wriggly tin, and you can actually get it in many different colours, but I thought black would look quite smart. And I've gone for the 0.7 mil thick. There's 2 sizes you can get because I wanted it slightly stronger. I've got it because it's the cheapest thing I could find. And for my big bed, which is 5.2 metres or something by 1.2, the whole corrugated iron for that cost me about 54 quid. So it is quite reasonable. And it comes in 990 millimetre wide sheets, and you can get them pretty much any length up to about 5 metres, I think. 990 is ideal for me because we can then, or Dave, cut it down the centre with an angle grinder, so each sheet is just under 500 millimetres high, and that is a perfect height for a raised bed. So there are the two lengths, and then we've got the two shorter lengths for the two ends, and then we put a post, and we've just used tannalized timber or pressure treated softwood timber, 75 by 75, just a bit longer than 500, and they will just go in each of the corners, and it goes together, as simple as that. It's good, isn't it? Let's hope it doesn't fall to pieces. Let's hope we got it right. It's a really exciting time now. We've actually got the raised beds in here and they're full of compost. Fantastic. It's not a thing of beauty, but I don't mind. It really is an industrial working space. We put the coping on the top so I can perch my bum on them, which is lovely, and it stops that sharp metal edge. I have made them completely longer than I would do outside as well. If I had this size in a garden, I think you'd be running around and around too much. But because this space inside is such a premium, I've made one long bed over 5 meters going right the length of the tunnel, and then I fitted the others in accordingly around the shelves and things. And the gaps in between, this is narrow, you know, this just measures 400 mil. And I thought about this hard and fast because I'm not bringing wheelbarrows in here. I'll put any weeds will go out in trugs or little plastic pot things, certainly not a wheelbarrow. And I'm even tighter there. And I am very conscious of width because when I did raised beds with veg at Chelsea one year, I had 600 wide paths, which I reckoned was pretty generous. And the judges criticised me because they said you needed wider gaps to get through. But I think in a growing garden, the growing space is a premium and the paths just need to be only just what you need, which is what I've done here. With the height of them, here, as I said, we've gone sort of just under 500, but I have seen ones, and we've made ones at worktop height, which is more like 800 mil. But then that is a massive structure. It has to be stronger, more materials, lots of fill, and you don't really need that depth for roots. As for the width, I've made them about 1.2, which is generally what I do for all raised beds, inside or out. 1.2 I think is good because you can easily stretch and work in that space. If you only had access on one side, you could just about reach over to the far side, but it would be a bit tight. The late great John Seymour, who's a famous organic gardener, said that from 9 square meters of raised fixed bed, you could feed one person for a whole year in vegetables. Fascinating fact, I've never checked it out. But we have got here 9 square meters pretty much in these 2 beds. And the reason they're so much more productive than other beds is because you've got a great growing medium in here. It's well drained. You can plant them closer together because the soil's beautifully aerated. And you never dig them, so you've got a wonderful build-up of microorganisms and worms and things like that. So it really is ideal. Now, how do you film with the best growing medium you can find? We'll talk about that in the next video.